To look behind the magic, we have to look at what Owen calls the AppFunc, the application function. The application function is how components process and interact with requests to the server by providing a delegate, a piece of executable code. This delegate matches the type func of iDictionary and task, where the dictionary is a dictionary of string and object. That means we have a function that takes a dictionary and returns a task. The dictionary represents the request environment. It's a simple dictionary of just string and object because there are no big abstractions with Owen. There's mostly just simple types involved. But inside the dictionary, you can find out everything about a request from the client and the response to the client. You can find headers, request and response objects, cookies, server variables, and more. I'll show you what's in the dictionary in a demo, but it's very similar to the HTTP context object that you might have worked with in ASP.NET or MVC because it carries all the information about a specific request. And the AppFunc always returns a task because modern web applications are async by default these days. The whole goal of being async is to keep the request processing threads as busy as possible. You process requests and you don't block or wait for operations to complete like database operations. If you want more details on async and await on the web, I have a module dedicated to that topic in my ASP.NET MVC4 Fundamentals course. The lowest level component that you can write then is a component that has a method matching that AppFunc signature. It returns a task and it takes a dictionary of string and object. And when you write a component at this low level, you'll find that Owen is all about a pipeline of components that don't know about each other but can work to fulfill a request. So one component might be checking for an authorization cookie, and another component might write out the welcome page or write out hello world for each request like we've done. But if you write a component that sits in the middle of the pipeline performing authorization checks or logging, you have to be aware that it's your responsibility to call the next component in the pipeline. It will have an AppFunc just like yours, so you can invoke that function and pass in the current environment. But where do you get that AppFunc for the next component? Well, that's easiest to demonstrate in a demo. Back in Visual Studio, we've been using useWelcomePage and run to process requests, but to really get to the heart of the matter, we'll have to write something a little lower level. I'm going to write a new class called the Hello World component. It's my goal that this component will write out hello world to every request, so I'm going to need to implement this class in a way that I can use it with the app builder and configure it in. And the one method that I'll have to add to this component for now is a method that matches that AppFunc signature. So it's a method that returns a task, I'll call it invoke, and it takes an iDictionary of string and object, which is the environment. And for right now, I want to do something that is illegal. I'm just going to return null from this method, but the Owen specification is pretty clear that you either return a task or you throw an exception. There is no such thing as returning null. I just want to show you what happens if I try to say, dear app, please use the hello world component. If I run this app with the debugger, I should get an exception. Because behind the scenes, what Katana does is it pokes around at these components with reflection to try to figure out what they can do and to try to work them into the pipeline. And one thing a component will need at this low level is a constructor that takes one argument. That's why we have an exception that we have a missing method exception, because it wants a constructor that takes one argument. And what is that one argument? That one argument is going to be the AppFunc for the next component in the pipeline. Whatever that is. Maybe it's a built-in component that I don't know about at all. But I need to have a constructor here, a constructor that takes a func of iDictionary of string and object and task. Now this is quite an ugly definition because of all the generic type parameters here. So one common trick that you'll see with the AppFunc is that you'll see code use a using statement to essentially alias that type. So this is saying AppFunc is a func of iDictionary of string and object that returns task. And now I can use AppFunc instead of the big long func definition. This is a lot like a type def in C++. The biggest difference in C# is that you cannot have this using apply across multiple source code files. So anywhere that you want to use the AppFunc, you'll have to define this using. Now I should be able to say that this constructor takes an AppFunc, which is the next component in the pipeline. What I want to do is save that off somewhere in a private variable. So I can say next equals next. And of course, I might want to do some validation there to make sure it's not null. But for right now, what I want to do is place a breakpoint on invoke. I want to make it an async method, and I simply want to await underscore next. So I want to invoke the next component in the chain, and when I do that, I have to pass along the dictionary, the environment. Now let's run the application, and I can see that it started. Now let me send a request to the application, and we hit our breakpoint. And what I want to look at is the environment, because inside of the environment are 28 keys and 28 matching values that represent everything about this request and response. And you can see here are some of the keys: owen.requestPath, owen.requestBody, owen.version. This is how we pass along information from component to component inside of the HTTP request processing pipeline. And some of the key value pairs that are in this environment are required by the OWEN specification. So they have to be here, and you can count on them being in here. Other key value pairs might be put here by other special components that have been added to this application, like things related to HTTP listener. That's only something that you could depend on when you're hosting using the HTTP listener package. Now at this low level, if I just want to write something into the output and not even call the next component in the pipeline, I just want to end everything and send something back to the client, what I'll need to do is pull out owen.responseBody, because that will let me write into the body of the response. So let's stop debugging. And what I will do is first get a reference to that response. So the response is environment sub owen.response body. And I'll be able to treat this as a stream, something I can write into. And stream, of course, requires system.io to be present. So I'll bring in that namespace with Visual Studio. And a stream is nice, but it's not as nice as having a stream writer, which lets me write strings into the stream. So let me create a writer, which is a new stream writer that wraps that response. And now what I will do is return writer. Let's write async. That will produce a task that I can return. And I should be able to write out hello with 2 exclamation points because I'm very excited. And now, since I'm not using await, I can actually remove the async modifier here and return this task. But let's try to see if this works. There the application is started. And if I refresh, I get hello with the 2 exclamation points. So this is the lowest level Katana component that you could write. I register it with the app builder. Katana will poke at it with reflection, look for this invoke method that matches the AppFunc signature, and it will instantiate this component, giving me the next component in the pipeline, and start using it to process requests. And really what we had before with app.useWelcomePage and app.run, those were just wrappers that created some sort of component that could use an AppFunc. In fact, if I wanted to make it easy for people to use Hello World component, maybe what I could do is create an extension method. So my app builder extensions for this particular component include a method called use Hello World. That's an extension for iAppBuilder. And all that will do is simply tell an app builder to use this Hello World component. And it's a little bit of syntactic sugar, because now what people can do if they install my component, if they have it available, is they can just say app.useHelloWorld, and we'll have the same results as before. But now you notice that this looks like app.useWelcomePage. Instead of the welcome page, which is nice and pretty, I'm just using my Hello World component, which writes out hello.